As of late, I've been doing a lot of post-production projects, and I don't know if I've ever talked about it on my channel before, but I think it's worthwhile to break down my process with a post-production project versus just a regular production project. So today I'm going to break down my post-production process using a song that I did recently for my friend Ryan called Sonic Boom. It's out now. It sounds like this. I'm going to break down my thought process and my approach whenever somebody sends me stems for a post-production project. And yeah, I'm going to walk you through all my ear candy layers and synth stuff. It's going to be a good time. But also, before we jump into the video, I just recently opened up an application for people to apply for a one-on-one mentorship with me. So if you go to produceguitarpop.com/mentorship, you can fill out this form and apply. I'm only going to be taking on a few people, and that's not some weird salesy thing. I only have the capacity with my production business to take on like a couple people at a time. But yeah, if that interests you, check out the link in the description or go to produceguitarpop.com/mentorship. All right, now to the video. So first I will show you a snippet of what Ryan sent me, which this is the original demo. I'm not going to play the whole thing because it wasn't like a mix, but I think it demonstrates the kind of stuff that you can do with a post-production project versus a regular production project. And now we will listen to the final version that I sent to Ryan after we finished. All right, so we'll start with the major things. First of all, I added a bass. Pretty early on, Ryan was like, yeah, I know that there needs to be bass in it. So I just programmed something real quick with punk bass and parallax. I would probably put that on like more of like the lesser changes that you tend to see with post-production. But other than that, you can hear we did quite a bit to it. And I think an important thing to talk about with post-production is what defines post-production versus just a regular production project. And for me, it's actually pretty simple. Are we using all of the elements that they have made from their own demo, like in the actual track? Like, is it a majority we're using the takes that they recorded? Or am I taking that general song structure, that idea, and crafting it on my own from scratch? So while there are elements that I did replace, most of the time it was like, I don't like this clap sample, let's do the exact same thing you did in your production but with a different clap sample, or just mixing the stems that you already have, or me choosing a different tone for the guitars, and then a couple of other ear candy things with the vocal. But yeah, if you're considering hiring somebody to do post-production on your song, or if you're wondering, is post-production the right move for me, or should I just hire somebody to produce it from scratch, I would genuinely send your tracks to somebody who you would like to have produce your track and ask them, do they think that these tracks are at the quality that they would need to get them over the line? Because there have been plenty of times where somebody has asked me to do a production project and I straight up have been like, honestly, I can't really accept this as a production project because to me, this kind of feels done. And that's normally where I will pivot people to a post-production project, because normally I feel like their track already has like the vibe that it needs and it's just a couple of small tweaks. But yeah, let's start with the guitars. So you can tell from like the original demo, I was able to take the overall vibe from Ryan's original guitar tone, and he sent me over a DI that just sounded like this. And so I didn't want to like change the sound that he had made, because it was very obvious to me when I was listening to the demo that that delayed guitar vibe was kind of like the heart and soul of the song. So I went to a guitar patch that I had made for my Les Paul with Fishmans, and luckily it kind of matched this tone. A little bit of honkiness, but in like a good way, and a little bit of EQ. A little bit of chorus. A little bit of soothe on it. Just because it was a little bit of a harsh boy. And then on Ascend, I had it going to H delay. So you can tell, like, even in the way that I'm approaching this guitar tone, I'm not trying to make it like a completely different vibe. I think that's probably the thing that you and whoever your post-production producer need to talk about the most, is like, what are like the parts of the song that you like really love, things that you like want to preserve from the demo that you want to stay. We then have these two, we then have this power chord layer, which is just a tone that I made. It is not a preset called Reset All Settings, because I knew that we wanted that sort of Band Camino style grunge layer underneath everything, because I felt like that was already a lot of the strength of the original demo, was how it had this sort of like off time vibe that was just like begging for like a really chunky, thick layer underneath it. So this was more of an element of keeping the intent of the song, but I always use this analogy with some of my production clients. We're not trying to make it sound different. Like, we're not trying to make the tree lean in like a different direction. We're trying to get it to lean more in the direction that it's already leaning. Like, we want it to go even farther into the realm that it's headed. We then have these open chords here, which we're using the insert riffs here preset, because I feel like that works really well with stuff like this where it's more of like open voiced chords. But if I turn off all the effects and all the things that I've added to them, this is what they originally sound like. Oh, and then we have these guys here. I don't know, they were just like fun little grimy boys, so I just threw them into like the most insanely distorted patch that I thought was applicable. It's called the Ferryman. This is honestly where, if I was getting somebody else who wanted to work on a song in this style with me, we would have conversation about like guitar tone and like, what are they looking for? Because it's one thing to send like raw DIs to somebody, which is always really helpful. But I think what's more important is explaining what you're trying to go for with your track. Like, me and Ryan had conversations about the sound that we were going for, and he was really loving a lot of songs and bands from either Jordan Schmidt, who does stuff for Band Camino, or Will Carlson, who does everything for Bill Murray. So we knew that we wanted big and punchy and thick. So now everything has to sort of lean in that direction, just to get like a really chunky, thick vibe to it. A lot of the drums Ryan had already programmed and had rendered out as audio files, which was great. So I just threw them into this massive group. I sort of separated them by what would be like the shells, what would be like sort of individual hi-hat or cymbal mics. I sort of grouped those together as their own thing, just because I feel like there was a little bit of edge on those mics specifically that I wanted to smooth out. For stuff like this, I really like the matte cymbals preset in Soothe 2. If I solo the Delta, you'll hear a lot of those like really ringy frequencies. They just kind of get brought down in like a really nice natural way. But yeah, these are the drums. I will solo them for you. I think on the kick, I did a little bit of transient shaping, just because I wanted to shorten it up a little bit. And then I think I left the snare and the toms just as is. I thought that they sounded fine. That's also another thing that a good post-production producer will know how to do, is how to like leave stuff that's good. I think that sometimes people can like change stuff too much, or like they can get a little bit of an ego thinking like, okay, well, I have to replace everything and like put my sound on it. But honestly, I was listening to this and was like, okay, I can like hear exactly what I would want to hear from a kick that I was adding. I think Ryan literally used like the same library as me, so it was a little bit easier here in this scenario. But that kind of became a golden rule for me as I was going through all the different elements, like me almost appraising it from the perspective of a listener, of like, what's something fun or cool that's like already in here. If there's something cool in here, I want to like leave it and even highlight it. There were a couple of elements in the original demo that were like really quiet, and I ended up bringing them up because I thought they sounded really cool. Probably the thing that changed the most was the sound effects. So these are all of of the sort of risers and crashes that we have going. I solo them out. They sound like this. So you can hear we're doing the standard, like layering some risers, specifically like different voiced risers. So we have this top one here. Sort of a higher voiced one, this one below it. One that's voiced even a little bit higher, and then this one below. One that's almost like a whistly tone, and then that's being mixed with this amethyst sample here, which is like a melodic riser, which I thought sounded really cool. You do have to be careful though, because you have to like tune them to like the key of the song. Then we have this transition. Honestly, I don't know why I threw that in there. I think I just wanted to throw in something that like kind of blurred the line a little bit, because it's really easy to have all of your risers stop at this point and all of your crashes hit at that point and like have nothing to like blend them together. So sometimes just adding a little sample just to bridge that gap just makes it a little bit nicer. Also, as you can tell, there is a little bit of automation with a trance gate. That's just adding a little bit of a filter sweep as we go into it. I just thought it added like a cool like rhythmic texture to it. That's another way that you can sort of think of like special effects or ear candy, is like, are there any pockets in the pre-existing instrumental that would benefit from having like a little bit more spice in them? And sometimes that's just getting somebody's second ears on the track that you've been working on for a long time. Like for me, there's been so many points where I've made instrumentals and I've just sent them off to somebody else, either me selling the song or them doing some like post-production work on top of it. And it just always surprises me what I hear when they send it back, because there's always these like little pockets or things that I'm just like, I didn't even realize that there was like a melodic pocket like right here, or oh, you did this fill thing, I didn't even realize there was like an empty space there. It's literally just getting a second pair of ears on something to get a fresh perspective on it. We also had a fun little bass drop here. Now see, this is an example of where we replaced the element, but we kept the intent. So I will play you this section and I want you to listen to the claps. So that clap riser thing was actually something that was in the original demo, but it had some slightly different samples on it. And even though I wanted to replace the samples, I knew I wanted to keep that similar sort of like rising, stacking pattern. So we started out with this guy, just to get sort of like a baseline clap sound. I then added this cashmere snare. But that was more to get the like sloppiness of a clap. Like those two stacked together, they like don't perfectly align. You can see like the actual like main hit of this cashmere snare is actually happening a little bit after this guy. And so together they sound like this, which is just like a nice sort of like static throaty clap. And then we have this guy under here, which is like the most like stubby, like stabby snare, which doesn't actually sound that great on its own, in my opinion, but when it comes in as a layer supporting those first two claps, it can like raise the tension a little bit in the context of the track. And then we have this other snare called shampoo, which that is a transition that I made. I just threw all these claps on the grid, and then I went to the clip envelope section inside of Ableton, and you can see I just sort of slightly pitched it up. And then a little bit of auto pen on these like last few elements just to sort of make it weird. So all of those claps together on their own sound like this. Which on their own, you know, they sound like okay, but when you layer them in with the rest of the track, They just make the transition feel more alive. So for the most part with the synths, we actually kept a lot of what Ryan had already. So we had this piano and this organ. Ryan has a fun, like, little musical theater quality to a lot of his stuff, and I felt like that was like a really cool flavor to add. The stuff that I did add was more of a supporting those stabby hits, that do 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 do. So here are the synths that I added. So a lot of things going on. We have these two Junos, which is this classic Rode preset inside of Arturia. And then I think I doubled it up like an octave higher for this guy. Yeah, and then with both of these guys, I threw on some saturator from Ableton just because I wanted them to pop out a little bit more. Where a lot of the flavor is coming from is this guy. This is probably one of my favorite Vital presets that I've made. I've called it Angry Reese, and it's just this deep, throaty, distorted Reese bass, just a ton of compression and soft clipping. And I think the thing that I like about it is that it just turns into this really like throaty, deep mid-range layer for any chord progression that I throw it under. So if I take these guys and I turn them off and we listen to it. Like, it doesn't sound wrong, but when I throw them under it. It just fills out the mid-range and the throatiness in the mix, especially when you throw it into mastering and everything gets a little bit more flattened. All of like the stuff that's subtly being filled in on the mid-range with these guys, it then gets brought up. I did the mixing for this record, so if you've watched any of my previous videos, it's the same vocal chain that I'm always using, plus a bit of Decapitator. I think I've said before, like, I really like Decapitator when I need to get like some grit out of a vocal, so I'll normally put it like midway here, like 4 to 6 in that general range, and then I'll bring down the mix knob. So the main vocal, so if I turn off the effects, it sounds like this. So without the distortion, it sounds like this.
Our love was non-stop, no sleep, full speed, supersonic last night.
But if I turn Decapitator on and I turn up the mix to basically all the way wet, you can hear it's like really gritty and it's bright because I've made it that way. But if I bring it down to about here,
what would lie ahead for you and I? Our love was non-stop, no sleep, full speed, supersonic.
There's these little bits of distortion that sort of pop out of the vocal, and I thought this was just like a perfect vibe for that. A thing that I did do though, which I think I've talked about in previous episodes, is when I'm doing like vocal ear candy, what I will tend to do is render out the entire main vocal as audio. So I will just turn off all the reverb. I'll keep the vocal mixing chain on, but it will basically just sound like this.
Yeah, just to survive.
And I'll normally just be working on like what I call my vocal candy bus, and I'll just have that at the top here. And whenever I have like an effect that I want to fly in, I'll just like grab a chunk from that, put it on its own track. And I don't know, I've just found that I have enjoyed vocal production a lot more when I've done it that way. So the first section that we have of ear candy sounds like this. So that is a couple of elements put together. First we have this guy, which is mainly just to fill stuff in. I use this delay plugin. I just feel like it's really good for finding delay patches that are more sound designy in nature, like not just straight like boring delay or like a tape delay or something like that. If I want something like really crazy, I'll go for this. It also has a really cool like randomized button that it will give you the weirdest results, but it's great for sound design. But the main attraction for that section are these guys. So we have a bus with Decapitator and Tau chorus on it. I'll turn those guys off for a second. But we have the vocal rendered out with a little bit of Alter Boy going up an octave with the formant down. I feel like this is one of those settings where it can help to turn up the drive on little Alter Boy a bit. And then we have the same thing, but instead of an octave up, it's just the octave it was before, but the formant's turned down and the drive's a little bit less. So those two together sound like this. And I was just messing around with it, so I threw some decapitator on these guys, and the mix was not down. It was all the way up. Just to get some of like that like gritty claustrophobic feel to it. And then a little bit of tal chorus. And then ran it into some ROM reverb. And now that section has basically become like its own like hook. And that was just using like the raw material that was already in the track. Some other fun little bits of ear candy. We have this guy here, which again is the Transgate. In case you can't tell, I love this thing. I know a lot of people use LFO tool, but I just end up using Transgate most of the time. If I undo what I've done, you can see I did probably one of my favorite ways to get like a long trail with something like this is you find like a note or a phrase that you like. So you can hear that. Oh, that's actually the beginning of Ryan saying the line, I won't forget the night the first time that I saw you. So I like took that line, chopped through a really long reverb on it, and then I reversed it. If you look here, you can see it actually starts the second the actual vocal comes in. So it's almost like a riser into itself, but using that same like word as a riser.
I won't forget the night.
And then we did some other fun stuff like that glitchy delay throw. After I have the vocal sort of rendered out as its own thing, I'll just have a track like this that's like delay throws, and I'll just grab that printed mixing chain vocal and I'll just sort of drag and drop it onto tracks that have sort of fun little effects.
That I saw you.
So that's that word transposed an octave up and run through that same macho preset on delay. And this is why I like doing the ear candy stuff with audio, because I feel like it's a lot more flexible than trying to route things with aux sends. But you can see we have other little elements. We have the low formant coming in. Then we have some other stuff. Then up here we have a different layer. That guy right there is a vocal synth preset. But it only comes in for like a phrase or like half of a phrase. Probably my favorite one is this guy's. So it's this guy here. And it's just a word repeated immediately after itself. Almost sounds like a delay throw, but it's a little bit more controlled. So you can place exactly where you want it to be, but it's just decapitator and ROM. And you just get this like really cool distorted tail. So in a track that sounds like it's just one vocal, you have all of this going.
I won't forget the night, the first night that I saw you. Felt like I was dying, my life flashed in front of my eyes. Hearing wedding bells the first time that I kissed you. Thought without you I'd be gasping at the air just to survive. I didn't know what I was never missing out on. Didn't realize it, the more you fall, the higher you climb. I didn't know the first time I laid with your body what would lie ahead for you and I. Our love was non-stop, no sleep, full speed, supersonic.
And then all of the other main backing vocals come in, and you can tell, like, you can get one single vocal to be really well arranged and well organized if you use your ear candy correctly. But yeah, after all of that work, it sounds like this.
I won't forget the night, the first night that I saw you. Felt like I was dying, my life flashed in front of my eyes. Hearing wedding bells the first time that I kissed you. Thought without you I'd be gasping at the air just to survive. I didn't know what I was never missing out on. Didn't realize it, the more you fall, the higher you climb. I didn't know the first time I laid with your body what would lie ahead for you and I. Our love was non-stop, no sleep, no speed, supersonic. Last year, last night, last fight, never gonna. Went from the flowers of doubts out of tune. We moved so fast that you and me made a sonic boom.
So yeah, that's what the track sounds like. Ryan is a really fun dude, and I'm really happy I got to work on this song with him. If you are interested in a post-production project, you can check down the link in the description below. Maybe we could work together on something. There's a Discord down below for anybody who's interested in topics like these. And again, if you're interested in a mentorship with me one-on-one, there's an application down below. But I will see you guys next week.